Good evening and welcome to this Monday edition of the Select Board meeting. It is Monday, the 25th of October, and pursuant to a bunch of statutes that I consistently cannot recall, but that enable us to appear both live as well as via Zoom, we're here before you today with multiple methods of observing, all of which are posted. And to that end, everyone please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Recording in progress.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. So, for everybody who is here tonight or observing at home or perhaps later remotely, this is somewhat of a different format from our usual select board meeting. It is on a Monday, it is about one specific topic, and it has some set rules that Blythe has kindly sort of created a cheat sheet for me so that we can proceed in a method that ensures that everybody is treated fairly and that the record is accurate and that we've complied with the statute. So to the extent that I mess anything up, I apologize in advance. Blythe will throw an object at my head, but I've given her permission, so it is maybe not a metal object, but to the extent that there's procedures to be followed, the first is that the select board chair, which is me, CC Van Tine, should make introductory comments which address the following: that this is in fact a dangerous dog public hearing under Mass General Law, Chapter 140, Section 157. That written notice of this public hearing was provided to the owner of the dog that is the subject of the complaint, and there is a hearing notice that was sent to the dog owner, and there's bold print that indicates that I am to read that hearing notice, and I'm assuming that's right now as opposed to any point farther in the thing. So let me get to the hearing notice. And the hearing notice is as follows, dated September 30th, 2021, to Miss Angelina Ford of 45 Medway Street, Norfolk, Mass. Notice of public hearing under Mass General Law, Chapter 140, Section 157. On Monday, October 25th, 2021, please be advised that the Norfolk Select Board, the board, has received a written complaint, a copy of which is attached hereto as Exhibit A, under General Law, Chapter 140, Section 157, Section 157, a copy of which is attached hereto at Exhibit B, alleging that two dogs named Chance and Maggie that you own and or keep at property located at 45 Medway Street. The property has attacked a leashed dog on Medway Street adjacent to your property. See back to Exhibit A. Accordingly, pursuant to Section 157, the board shall investigate or cause the investigation of the complaint, including an examination under oath of the complainant at a public hearing in the municipality to determine whether the dog is a nuisance dog or a dangerous dog, again pursuant to General Law, Chapter 140, Section 157. The board shall commence such public hearing, on Monday, October 25th, 2021 at 7 p.m. The meeting will be held at the Norfolk Town Hall, 1 Liberty Lane, Norfolk, Mass, in room 124. As you will note, the complaint and materials submitted to the board, copies of which are attached as Exhibit C, allege that on Friday, September 17th, 2021, your dogs, Chance and Maggie, bit and injured a leashed dog being walked by its owner on Medway Street adjacent to your property. See Exhibits B and C. At the public hearing, the board intends to hear testimony from the complainant and others, including you, the Town of Norfolk Animal Control Officer, members of the Town of Norfolk Police Department, witnesses, and members of the public, among possible others. You may have counsel represent you at the public hearing. In addition, the board will review any materials submitted to it in connection with the public hearing, including the attached materials submitted to date. Please note that at or prior to the public hearing, you may submit materials to the board. Please do not hesitate to contact me with any questions regarding this matter. Blythe Robinson, Town Administrator. I don't need to read the attachments, correct?
No, you could just reference them generally, what's included.
All right. So with respect to the attachments, there is an Exhibit A, which is the request for the hearing. Exhibit B is the general law, Mass General Law, Chapter 140, Section 157, which is available, I'm sure, for folks to review here, but is also available online. And Exhibit C is an incident report from Norfolk Animal Control dated September 17th, 2021 at 7:25, forgive me. The original narrative to the incident report, photographs of the injured dog, documents from Acorn Animal Hospital outlining the injuries, a further incident report dated April 20th, 2021 at 8 a.m., email communications regarding the attack, the dog attack, an animal complaint on September 22nd, 2021 incident report, additional emails regarding the dog incident,
There are a number of those.
and then, so I'm scrolling through the incident, and then a witness statement which was forwarded via email. That appears to be the exhibits A through C. Look at me getting ahead of myself. The select board chair shall identify but not read into the record the materials that have been submitted. See, I should have just read this in advance. Anyone who wishes to speak or ask questions will have an opportunity. Questions should be directed to any witness through the chair. Speakers should stick to relevant issues and be respectful. And those wishing to present documents or written evidence during the public hearing, i.e. until the select board closes the public hearing for purposes of conducting deliberations, may do so by indicating such intent to the chair, at which point the submission may be transmitted either by screen sharing, email to the town administrator's email address, etc. I'm assuming since we're live, they could also
Hand it to us.
hand it to us. So then the next is to swear in any witnesses collectively. So how many witnesses do I have? Is there anybody else going to make a statement? So I'm going to basically say, do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? All witnesses having been sworn at the same time. If a new witness arrives later, or if somebody changes their mind and decides they want to be heard, we'll swear them in separately. Be swearing. Oh,
I would just add that I assume the dog owner is going to speak.
okay.
And I don't know about the owner of the dog that was injured. I'm not sure.
I submitted all my reports,
So not planning to speak. It's just important to swear in.
Yeah, and I can swear someone else in. Like, if anybody changes their mind and wants to talk or isn't comfortable talking, we'll deal with it. But
Great.
swear people in with abandon.
Excellent.
So with having sworn the folks in, it indicates that the select board chair should invite the complainant to testify as first witness, which in this instance I assume is not the
It's the animal
owner
control officer.
of the dog, but is the animal control officer who swore out the complaint. And to that end, would Ms. Cohen please join us at the
Good evening.
good evening?
Hillary Cohen, your animal control officer, also a next-door neighbor of where all of these parties live. So I'm just going to read into the record my report, and if you have any questions, feel free to ask as they come up. This report may or may not contain all information from the Norfolk Police Department or the Norfolk Animal Control Department. This is a dog attack and use of force report on an animal. On September 17th, 2021 at 14:28, I, Animal Control Officer and Special Police Officer Hillary Cohen, was at my personal residence of 47 Medway Street, Norfolk, Massachusetts, off duty and out in my barns taking care of my horses. While in the barn, I heard a blood-curdling screams coming from the roadside near 45 Medway Street. I dropped what I was doing as I had thought a pedestrian or a cyclist may have been hit by a car from the screams I heard, and ran up to the roadside. I saw a woman with a leashed dog, a Wheaton Terrier type, and I apologize if the breed is wrong, in the throes of a dog attack. The two dogs aggressing and mauling the Wheaton were bully breed type animals. Both bully breed type dogs were latched on and aggressing and mauling the Wheaton. Both bully type dogs were latched on to the Wheaton in the throat region and the abdominal region. They were not biting, retracting, and reaggressing. They were latched on and trying to tear side to side. There were also two young women, girls, is what I wrote in the report. They're trying to grab the bully breed type dogs by the collar and pull them off the Wheaton without any success. One of the young girls was later identified as the dog owner's daughter, and at the time of this probable cause report, it is unknown of the name of the other young woman. They were ineffective at being able to have their dogs released in any fashion. The Wheaton owner, later identified as Janice Body of Medway Street in Norfolk, was hysterically screaming and crying, watching her dog being mauled. Knowing that the dogs had already started to try side-to-side wound infliction, I grabbed the nearest tool possible to facilitate the dog's release: a cement cast garden gnome near the mailbox of 48 Medway Street. I instructed Janice Body to stand still, even though reflexively she wanted to pull the leash and run off with her dog. I instructed both girls to hold the collars of the bully breed dogs from the rear of their animals in a manner where they were straddling the dogs with their legs over the dog's haunches. Not to get near the bullies' heads, and whatever they do not release the collars, even after the dog's released. I then proceeded to work on the first dog, the smaller of the two bully breeds, known as Maggie, who was biting the Wheaton in the torso, abdomen, and lower throat area. I wielded one strike to the dog's head with the garden gnome to distract and divide the attention, yelling release, let go, and drop. This did not stop the bite. I struck the dog 2 more times and she released. The party holding the dog released the collar and Maggie reattached for a secondary attack. I struck the dog 3 more times with the garden gnome, instructing the handler not to let go of the dog this time. Maggie was released from the Wheaton. I instructed the handler to bring Maggie into the back, inside to their dwelling, and ensure that she is safely inside and restrained. I then went to work on the second bully breed, known as Chance, who was still attached to the Wheaton. In this particular animal and handler situation, I struck the dog 5 times in the head and he would not release. I changed tactic and struck the dog 3 more times in the muzzle snout area, 3 times, and he released. I was bitten in the right hand as a redirection bite from Chance. I advised Body to walk her dog approximately 20 feet away, and I used myself as a visual shield as Chance was intent to continue attacking if he had the opportunity. I spoke to Chance's handler the full way up to the door of 45L Medway Street and ensured that he was safely inside. During the incident, a passing motorist stopped named Eric Jackson and had called 911. I instructed him to alert the 911 operator that animal control was on scene, but please send police to the location. Once I knew the aggressing dogs were restrained, I asked Body to walk down my driveway with her dog so I could assess if there was arterial bleeding, as the dog had substantial blood all around its throat. I collected basic information from the dog owner. Norfolk police arrived on scene and started talking with Brittany Ford, the handler of Chance, and the dog owner's daughter. Body was too afraid to walk up my driveway in fear she and her dog would be attacked again. I instructed her that her dog needed to go to the veterinarian immediately. She told me that her dog was a patient at Acorn Animal Hospital. I contacted Acorn Animal Hospital directly and advised them that their client was rushing their dog in for emergency care. I then escorted Body and her dog up my driveway and down Medway Street towards Truro Road. I escorted to Truro Road, and Body took it from that point. Body stated that several times that this was not the first time that this has happened to her dog with these dogs. I asked her if she had reported the first incident, and she stated no. Body was adamant that I remove the bully breed dogs from the town. I went back up to the curb area where Norfolk police were standing and talking with Brittany Ford to get information on the dogs. During this time, I noticed that she had an injury on her right ankle, right side, that appeared to be a bite mark and blood on the left side of her ankle. I asked her if she was okay, and she stated she was. She stated that she was on such an adrenaline rush that she felt nothing. Myself and the police officers reassured her that at any time she needed assistance and someone to help, to call for help. I also informed Brittany that she needs to keep an eye on her dogs to see if there are any neurological deficits to her dogs due to having to use a cement object on their heads to release from the attack. I told her to look for fixed pupils, odd pupils, which means one dilated, one not, head tilt, any neurological symptoms. I also instructed her to tell her mother to keep a watch as well. Any off behavior from the animals, and they need to take their dogs to the veterinarian immediately. I then contacted Acorn Animal Hospital back once the altercation was over and asked them to please photograph any injuries on the Wheaton. I researched both Chance and Maggie's vaccination and license history and found that they are both licensed and both up to date on their rabies vaccinations. After the incident ended, I cleaned the wound on my right hand, took a picture, and then contacted the property owner of 45 Medway Street, Heather Cohen. I informed her of what transpired and the severity of the situation. I also contacted Angelina Ford via telephone to inform her of what happened. Ford was very short with me on the phone, so I was unable to determine a tone. I explained the quarantine procedure to her and that she would be receiving a call from the animal inspector for her to make an appointment to deliver paperwork. Approximately 30 minutes later, Angelina Ford's boyfriend walked down my driveway as I was about to leave my property. He stated he had just drove home from Stoughton as he had heard what was going on. At the time of this report, all I know is his name is Aaron. I tried to inform him of the severities of the injuries, and he wanted to argue in my driveway that this is the first time ever. Pit bulls get a bad rap. We'll pay their medical bills. Dogs bite each other all the time, and we can make a private deal with the town and the dog owner to keep our dogs. I explained under Mass law that there are two options. One, they either find a suitable home for these dogs or have them euthanized, or two, that any party in the Commonwealth may petition to hold a dangerous dog hearing. I did state to him that I would throw the idea of a private agreement to the victim dog's owner, but there is no recourse on a civil agreement, so I did not think it would be welcomed. I also informed him of the claims that the victim's dog owner stated that this has happened before, but I was unaware of the details at the current time. As I was getting no resolve with Aaron in my driveway, I stated to him that this has nothing to do with the animal's breed, as he kept reiterating pit bulls get a bad rap. That if his dogs were dachshunds, I would have said the exact same thing to him, and that I was not interested in playing judge and jury in my personal driveway. Present for part of this conversation was Joseph Quinton, who resides with me. He was not present for the whole conversation, but when he heard loud voices and saw me in the driveway loudly conversing, he came out of the house to make sure that the incident didn't escalate into a physical altercation. No physical altercation transpired. Aaron did leave the property peacefully. I then went across the street to 48 Medway Street to speak with the homeowner there to ascertain if they have any surveillance cameras and they stated they do not. I asked if they had seen the incident that took place, and she stated she was working from home and heard the commotion. I informed her and apologized that I used their garden gnome near their mailbox to de-escalate the dog attack. She understood and was accepting of this situation. She stated that she too has had an issue with the dogs at that residence being loose upon her property on 2 occasions. She stated that she and her family are not dog people, and in one incident she stated her young daughter went out to the garage, saw Chance in there, and came in terrified and upset. I informed the resident at 48 that I would be contacting her Monday for a formal statement. Previous history. I have had 2 incidences with Chance running at large. In one incident, I was home off duty and MEC contacted me on my cell phone that a Leland Road resident was driving down Medway Street and was concerned seeing a pit bull printing on one of my horses. And to explain, printing is stalking, watching, and was concerned he was going to attack. The horse in question is a mini horse and weighs approximately 300 pounds. She pulled over on Truro Road to see what unfolded. I ran up the driveway to find the reporter and Angelina Ford in the roadway. Chance had run off down Barnstable towards Chatham Road. I went back to my driveway and grabbed my marked vehicle and started searching the area as well. Angelina and I caught up with each other while I was still searching, and she had found Chance and had him secured in her vehicle. In another incident in the early morning, I was leaving to head into work, and Aaron was walking around on my property with a dog leash in hand calling for Chance. Aaron stated that Chance had escaped from a hole in their fence and he couldn't find him. I informed him I would start driving around the neighborhood, and if I found him, I would call their landlord, Heather, to get in touch with him. I also asked him if there were any concerns about the dog's behavior, and he did state he does not like other dogs. I received a call from Norfolk Police Officer Chris Catalano at 18:03 p.m. on the evening of this report, stating that Janice's body was in the lobby of the police department inquiring what is happening to the dogs. I informed him to let her know that I was still working the incident and that I would be calling her in approximately 30 minutes. Catalano asked if I had been injured, and I stated I had been bitten. I gave him a brief rundown of what the procedures are in a dangerous incident like this to relay to the body family until I could contact them. At approximately 18:25 the same evening, I contacted Janice's body via telephone. I learned that her dog, Riley, the Wheaton, needed to be fully anesthetized and substantial surgical repairs were happening. I informed her of the procedures and options going forward, and I did talk with her on Aaron's idea of a written agreement to alleviate this situation. We discussed the options, and I asked her what her thoughts were going forward. She stated she believed she would like a dangerous dog hearing. I concurred with this, as there have been too many incidences involving a lack of control of the dog Chance, and for the ferocity of today's attack upon another dog. I also instructed Body to send me post-operative photos and a full statement via email this weekend. More to follow when more information becomes available. Currently attached to the incident is the veterinary reports from today from the Wheaton, photos of the Wheaton Terrier on the surgery table, and photos of my redirection bite to my right hand. And that is my incident report. To add, to fill in some of the blanks from that report, the last name of Aaron is Aaron Shepard. The second daughter on scene is Audrey Ford. Maggie came from a rescue called PA Pit Stop, based in Philadelphia, and the dog originated in Texas. Chance came from multiple previous owners from what I gather. Both dogs are licensed and vaccinated. The license registry states that Maggie is a pit mix and Chance is a pit bull. The town of Norfolk does not designate the breeds. This is what is listed on their veterinary paperwork. I did bring the garden gnome in case you guys needed to see it. But it does, just for reference, it does weigh 8 3/4 pounds.
Is that all until we ask the questions? Does that end your initial statement?
That ends my initial statement.
I don't want to jump in. I just have a couple questions, and then I'm sure other folks up here do as well. With respect to the 8-pound garden gnome, I'm imagining that you used you used as much force as you could. Were there any injuries as a result of that reported with Maggie or Chance?
So I received word from Angelina Ford's landlord, who is also a family member to Heather Cohen, which is the landlord. And I did receive a text message saying that there was no signs of any trauma to the animals.
And what side I'm looking at the veterinary report for the Wheaton Terrier, Riley, and it says that Riley's about 56 pounds, so sort of a mid-sized dog. Is Riley neutered? How big are Maggie and Chance?
I don't have a weight on them. That's not included with their rabies or licensing record. Maggie is smaller than the Wheaton. Chance is bigger than the Wheaton.
How old were the two girls that you were asking hold the collars and straddle the dogs, roughly?
I would say early 20s.
So, so adult enough that they were.
Yes.
Well, and I'll ask. So, let me see. And I know that you indicated that Riley's owner had said this was not the first time that there had been an incident. I'm assuming there's more in the documentation about that later that we'll get to.
Correct. She did file paperwork, including the previous incident along with this.
And that's the other incident that's, are there any other reports of dog bites involving Maggie and Chance
No,
that you're aware of?
up to that point, I had not been witness or received formal complaints on any bites.
And did you do any research to determine if any were you able to determine, and maybe you could or couldn't, that there were any from prior homes or placements or anything?
No, it seemed, the paper trail to go back and find the origins is not very, black and white.
And what happened with your redirection bite?
I wrapped it up. I was fine.
And how about the person, one of the Ford daughters was bitten?
It appears that way. I did not see the actual bite itself. It could be documented as a scratch, and I do not have follow-up on that except for when talking with Angelina, asking how the daughters were doing. This was several days later, and she expressed, that they were very shook up, understandably, and trying to process the whole situation.
The paperwork that I'm looking at from Acorn, does it include through to, I guess I'm assuming that there, and I know some of this will be from somebody else, but how far does the veterinary paperwork go in terms of Riley's care?
So I do know that there were, the initial incident for the surgery, and I believe, if I recollect correctly, that there were 2 follow-up appointments. I believe Janice Body supplied follow-up photos when the dog was back at home.
And do you, with dogs, do the same evaluation of bites that are done when it's humans, in terms of the depth of the bite, the scale, whatever the name of the scale is?
So there is there,
I don't remember.
it's a Dr. Ian Dunbar scale.
The
That's
Dunbar
right.
scale.
The Dunbar
I knew
scale.
it, but I didn't know it.
And these certainly qualify as level 5 bites. I have 99% certainty, if I had not jumped in, it would have been a level 6 where the dog died.
Mhm. So level 5 is the last before fatal.
Correct.
Is there anything else that you would want the fact finders to know?
I think at some point, when you talk to, and receive testimony from the neighbors that have their concern, I think as a neighbor myself, you should be aware that 45 Medway Street, 50% of their property borders my farm. So the right side of their property and the back side of their property. So if we do get into testimony of neighborhood concerns, I would like to speak as a resident.
Okay, but as the officer reporting, is there any other data that you think we don't have in front of us that you would want us to know? And then I have one last question.
I think the one thing that was not mentioned in the report is I do believe both dogs fed off of each other as far as the aggression factor. Because once Maggie released the first time, as soon as she got eyes and seen Chance still attached, she went for a reattach. And I do think that there is quite a few aggressive behavior issues, because even after Chance released, if he would have reattached if there was not a visual barrier. You could see him trying to look around me the whole time as he was printing on the wheat and looking at opportunities.
And my last question is, where are the dogs now?
I did learn today that Maggie has been rehomed in Woonsocket. I did hear that Chance has been rehomed in an unknown location in Massachusetts. I don't have any further documentation at this time.
And is there a documentation that you need?
I would like to, obviously, if there is a determination that will follow these animals, I would like to be able to confirm that they are indeed in their locations, and also inform their respective animal control officers, just as a heads up for public safety. I am happy, well, I wouldn't say happy, but I'm comfortable that they are in separate homes.
So they can't feed off of each other?
Correct. I don't think it's going to alleviate the issues. I think that the behavior still needs to be addressed, if that's appropriate, or the hearing authority deems that to be appropriate. But the two of them together, I believe it's just a dynamic duo that is avoidable.
Question?
Do you know the circumstances that preceded the attack?
So in this situation, I was told by Brittany Ford, the handler that was speaking with the police department, that the hole in the fence, the dogs were out back. They saw they didn't see the dogs run through the hole, but that there was a hole in the fence. And I believe Janice Body can probably answer that better as an eyewitness.
Hillary, you had mentioned that there were 2 incidents previously in which you were notified that Chance was loose. Do you have an approximate date of when those were?
So the one where he was loose on Truro Road going towards Cape Cod Estates was, let me just see, I think I wrote it the same day, but it was either on or around April 20th, 2021 at 8:04 hours
That's the one in the
in the packet.
exhibit C.
The second one, I did not write an incident report. It was more or less that Aaron and I were just chatting because he was looking for his dog on my property. And, I looked around the neighborhood, didn't find the dog. And if I recall correctly, I believe I texted the landlord, Heather Cohen, just to make sure that the dog had made it home. Obviously it had. But I didn't think at that point, just as a neighbor to neighbor, and nothing had transpired, that it rose to a formal incident.
If you had to ballpark, though, when would you say that was?
I would say that that was after the April incident.
Okay. Everything else I have has been answered. I'm good. Thank you.
I just have 2 follow-ups. With respect to the report from the incident narrative, forgive me, from April 20th, it indicates that the dog was reunited with owner and party notified to fix their fence. Was the fence fixed?
That I am unaware of. I do know that in speaking with the dog owner in this last incident, that she did convey to me that she was having a fence company come out and address the issues. I was home for most of the weekend. Not that I'm staring at my neighbors, but they are literally half my property. I can see a lot of theirs. I did not see anybody. It does not mean that a fence company did not come out. Sorry, this is very awkward. I mean, they're both my neighbors.
And so, do you know how long the dogs have been in town?
I believe since Maggie was not licensed in the previous year, I think she was a new addition. I believe Chance, I would have to definitively go back.
I'm sure
It's
they-
at least 2 years.
That's it for me. Anything more? Nope.
Thank you.
Thank you, Hillary.
So, in terms of the next witnesses, to the extent that I know that Riley's owner doesn't necessarily seem super fired up to come up here and speak, get that, but that the information that was submitted is in the packet. Is that the medical records? What else?
We don't have any current pictures of the dog, just what was received after the incident in September.
So I'm not missing anything other than
No.
the exhibits A, B, and C.
Correct.
And the emails. So is there, I'm assuming there must, I mean, I shouldn't maybe assume, but if there is an email from Riley's mom, I'll read it into the record, but.
Didn't see that.
I didn't either, but
There was one. Stated dog attack.
Oh,
What's
here
the
it is,
date?
Exhibit C. Oh, no, sorry, that's,
it's part of Exhibit C,
Eyewitness.
but. Oh, after the incident report? Oh, so you have to start it. All right, no, I'm looking at the wrong one. Yeah, everything.
I'm having trouble finding it.
Oh, here we go. I got. got it, and
Is
then I
it
don't.
after these? Dog incident,
I have dog attack, Drew Smith.
pit bull, incident on Medway Street, witness statement.
I don't have from the other.
If you, I can go make copies.
I can just read it in the record and then, somebody can make copies of it. I'll just read it first, just because I think the natural inclination, I'm gonna go with maybe not wanting to get up, and if we need to, we'll pull you up. But this is an email from, Janice Body to the Hillary Cohen, and I'm just making sure that I get to the beginning one. First communication. I guess so this is the first communication, and it's the one from at 10:40 p.m. And that is on Monday, July 12th, 2021. My husband and I were on our way home to 56 Medway Street after taking our 2.5-year-old Wheaton Terrier for his routine evening walk. As we passed 45 Medway Street, we were startled by two pit bulls at the residence, aggressively barking and growling and clawing at the fence they were enclosed in to get out. Within seconds, one of the pit bulls crawled under a space at the bottom of the chain link fence and ran across the street to where we were and attacked our leashed dog. My husband began kicking at the dog to get him off as I was screaming for the owners to get their dog. Two young women came running out of the residence and after several minutes were able to pull the dogs off. Riley was not bleeding and neither my husband nor I were hurt, so we hurried on home, which was only several houses away. I regret now not reporting the attack to the police or animal control, but we were just so relieved Riley was not hurt, although we were all very shaken up. We were very familiar with this house and were aware of these dogs because on many of our walks by this house we could hear the dogs barking as we passed by, but had never seen them out in the yard before. Once we had walked by and the front door was open and both dogs were aggressively barking and growling and clawing at the storm door to get out after us. They were very intimidating, and my husband commented how terrifying it would be if they ever broke through the storm door and got out. After the July 12, 2021 incident, we avoided walking by this house and took a different route for our walks. On Friday, September 17, 2021, I took Riley for a walk in our neighborhood. We were coming back from Lake Street and heading home down Medway Street. This was the first time I had walked this route since July. As we started to pass 45 Medway Street, again we were startled by two pit bulls running around the back of the residence to the chain link fence out front, aggressively barking and growling at us. Before I even had time to react, both dogs escaped under the space at the bottom of the fence and ran directly across the street to us and began viciously and brutally attacking and mauling my leashed dog. I was terrified. This time I was alone with my dog. I began screaming as loud as I could for help and calling for the owners while trying to hold on to Riley's leash and kick the dogs away. After several minutes, a young woman came running out of the residence and tried to pull the dogs off. This time she could not control them. Each dog had locked their jaws onto either side of Riley's neck as they continued biting and tearing his skin. It was horrific and terrifying. I just kept screaming and crying and tried to get them off as I watched them attacking Riley. Another young woman from the residence came running out and was trying to pull them off as well, but she could not get them to release either. 3 motorists stopped and got out of their cars, watching in horror, looking on, not knowing what to do or how to help. I learned later it was one of the motorists that called 911. After several minutes, Hillary, the animal control officer, arrived at the scene as she just happened to be out in her yard and heard my screams. She was not in uniform and did not have her gear, so she picked up a heavy lawn ornament that was in the yard we were now in and started repeatedly striking the top of each dog's head to get them to release Riley. This went on for several more minutes as I watched in horror at them trying to kill my dog. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, she got one dog and then the other dog to release, and the owners pulled the dogs away and brought them back into their house. By this time, the police had arrived. I could see Riley was bleeding in several areas from his neck. Hillary took us back into her driveway and took a quick assessment of Riley and said he did not appear to be bleeding out but had multiple puncture wounds. She called ahead to Weecorn Animal Hospital, where we are clients, and we were advised to bring him right over. I asked Hillary to escort me to my home just a few houses away because I was petrified to walk by that house again. I later learned that both Hillary and one of the dog's owners were also bit during the attack. I am so grateful to Hillary and the brave actions she immediately took to save our dog. I have no doubt that if she was not there at the scene, my dog would definitely have been killed by these animals. As I drove Riley to Acorn Animal Hospital, he was panting and breathing very heavily in the back seat of my car, and his eyes just looked dazed. I did not know how at this time how severe his injuries were, and I was concerned we would maybe lose him. Once at the vet, they informed me that given Riley was already an anxious dog, they would have to give him an injection to sedate him so that they could assess his injuries. The doctor came in and told us that he did have 5 to 6 puncture wounds in his neck. 2 of them were very deep, and he would need to be put under general anesthesia and have surgery to suture the many puncture wounds, and 2 tubes would need to be placed on either side of his neck to drain the wounds, to keep them clean and prevent further infection. We were able to take Riley home later that night. He was put on several painkillers and antibiotics. The first 2 nights home were miserable. Riley was very uncomfortable and whimpered most of the night, not being able to settle. We were given an itemized bill totaling over $1,000 so far. He will need to be put under sedation again next Friday to have the drains hopefully removed, and 2 weeks later to have his sutures removed, which obviously will be an additional cost to us. I cannot express how traumatizing this was for me and for my poor dog. I have not been able to sleep at all the last 2 nights because every time I close my eyes, I cannot stop visualizing Riley being attacked and the heartbreaking guttural sound that was coming from him as he was being mauled by these 2 dogs. I'm also very upset and horrified that these dogs are back in their homes with their owners. These owners knew that there was an issue with their fence back in July at the first attack, and yet they allowed their dogs to be loose in their yard, knowing they could get out and attack. This is pure negligence on their part. I don't know of any other solution but to have these dogs removed from their home and euthanized to ensure that no other dog is attacked or killed, not to mention what would happen if they ever got loose and attacked a child walking by the residence. My husband and I have lived on Medway Street for over 25 years. Through the years, we have pushed many baby carriages or walked our 4 children to school or uptown to the train station to go to work by route of Medway Street. It is not right that we are no longer able to do this for fear of going past 45 Medway Street because of the negligence of the owners who have no control of these dogs. They need to be removed immediately. And then attached are pictures of Riley this weekend post-surgery so you can see the extent of his injuries. We'll circulate, make sure that gets in the record. So do you have anything, ma'am, you want to add to that, or?
You just don't use the microphone or come to the table. It's just so that the audience at home can hear.
Again, as I stated, back in July, they knew of the incidents. I didn't report it at the time because I thought it was an isolated instance. I did feel bad for the young girl because she obviously was not able to control the dog, but she was able to pull him off at that time. But that was July 12th when the other woman came out to assist, I'm assuming they're sisters, and she yelled, how the heck did that was the one dog got out. She stated he crawled under the fence. So they knew in July that these dogs were escaping, and obviously by other people's complaints as well. So that was from July to September, the only other time I walked by that house, and again, the same thing happened. And I mean, my dog is healing, but he's not the same. He's timid, he's anxious. I have yet to walk him in the neighborhood. He's a dog that used to always just sleep downstairs, never had any problem. At night, he cries all night long. He wants to come upstairs and sleep in our bed. I mean, he's just very anxious. Now he's aggressive. If dogs are walking by our house, he's barking, which he never would even notice. And again, my biggest fear, I just don't think these dogs should be in a neighborhood setting. God forbid there was ever a small child. I just can't imagine the outcome of that. And I have no doubt that those dogs were going to kill Riley and were minutes away from killing him.
Any questions? I know that in terms of, thank you, I'm just trying to, before we get to other neighbors, I guess the the next one is just to determine, other than the owners, if there are any other witnesses, correct?
I think you should take the owner, my suggestion is take the owner next, and then any other witnesses. you'd
Oh,
like to
okay, I just
add.
read it, I read this as that the last person should be the owner, but that's fine. Invite, there
As
are
you,
no,
as you see fit.
I just didn't wanna like do something that the rules say I'm not allowed to do,
Nope.
so. Would, the owner like to come up? I don't know if you want to just sit with a microphone, you have two options, or sit at the table with one of these, so, yep. Whatever you're comfortable with.
First, we did understand and felt terrible about the entire incident. The two girls that were home are my daughters. One is Brittany is 23, and the other one is just 15, but she has autism, so she was trying her best to help the dogs. And when I spoke with Hillary and told her like the extent of everyone involved, like we were very upset, as was she, for that dog, for Riley very much so, and she was worried about our dogs, worried about everybody involved. We did, in reference to the fence situation, immediately right away, we did contact a fence company to come out and see. There was no pole on the bottom of the chain link fence, so if the dogs, and we do live in a duplex where there are 4 dogs in our combined 2 residences at 45. If any of them does a little hole, the dogs are able to push underneath. So that was the issue on how they were able to get underneath the fence. So immediately we did contact a fence company, but also after speaking numerous times with Hillary and really thinking about like the severity of the situation, as well as the behavior of our dogs and the safety of like just the neighborhood and our dogs as well. We didn't follow through with the fence repairs because we felt it was best to get some help to rehome the dogs. So that was the route that we chose. I spoke to Hillary a few times as well, and we did, I did immediately offer to pay the vet bills for Riley. We felt terrible and that it was not an expense that they should incur. So she facilitated how I would be able to pay the bills. I have paid all of the bills that have like come to my attention at this point. So it's not something that I do feel terrible, 100% for their dog, the situation, the long-term effect on their family and their dog as well. We understood after reading all the things, the issues, and we did take responsibility that maybe we weren't the best. Our situation was not the best place. When my younger daughter is home by herself, she would leave the dogs outside in the backyard for a few minutes, and it would cause. Unfortunately, it's just difficult for us to do that, and to ensure that even if the fence was fixed, that maybe we weren't the best place or home for these dogs. So that was the course of action we chose to take, and by no means did we ever. We just can't reiterate how awful we feel for everyone involved in the entire situation, and we do sincerely apologize and are willing to pay another follow-up vet bill if there's another one, or just do the right thing by everyone at a loss to us. We do absolutely love our dogs, and the dogs that we knew inside our home, unfortunately, were not the dogs that behaved that day. So I'm not sure I can answer any other questions, but that's just like the steps that we've taken from our behalf to feel as though we take responsibility and do the right thing to move forward for everybody involved.
I just have a couple of questions. Thank you so much for that and for everybody's comments and observations tonight. But with respect to rehoming, I'll start with Maggie. What organization or person did you get involved?
I don't know the specifics. So we reached out to anyone and everyone involved. We reached out to dog trainers. We reached out to specific pit bull like trainers and behavior specialists. We had some contact with I know like TBU on Route 1, and I do forget the name of the man. Like I said, we spoke to a million people who explained to us that, like Hillary mentioned, they did feed off each other. So when the intensity was high, they both rose to the intensity, and so he explained that to us that he didn't think there would be any sort of training that he could come to our house and do. So that's why we stopped the moving forward to fix the fence, because he didn't feel that there would be any training that would deter that behavior if they were in an intense situation together, is what he explained to us. So we reached out to like friends of friends of friends of anyone. We emailed multiple pit bull rescue groups and shelters and stuff like that. So off the top of my head, I do have it at home. I don't have it right here, but it was someone who was very familiar with pit bulls and placing them, who took Maggie right away. And then Chance had an intake, and he will be at the MSPCA in Rhode Island. And they are fully aware of the situation and why we didn't feel as though we're the best place for them.
Thank you. I don't have any questions. No.
I don't mean to go through it, just so I can match up the dates.
That's fine.
On July 12th is when you first realized that there was an issue with the fence, right?
Yes.
And it was at that time that you reached out to have the fence resolved.
We made our own repairs at the fence that time. We thought that we fixed it. So it's a complete chain link fence around our entire backyard, and we found the spot that they went under. And like I said, not to there's 4 dogs. So in our residence. So I'll take ownership of that. I didn't continuously check. I assumed I fixed the location of where they got loose. To the best of my ability, I thought it worked, and then apparently it didn't work again.
Okay, thank you. Sorry.
Welcome.
So, yes. What's next, Blay?
I would suggest if there are any
complaining?
other witnesses that would like to speak, you just can swear them in and let them provide any testimony they wanted to provide.
All right, so, I know that there was a couple of people, well, I think one who, I only saw one other person who raised their hand, but is there any other witnesses who didn't want to speak before, who now want to speak?
Witness from that day, but I am a neighbor who has had many issues. I've lived on Medway
Swear
Street
them
for
in.
30 years, and
So-
same thing, walked my...
Okay, I'm just gonna interrupt you for 1
Yep.
second, ask you to switch the mic, raise your right hand, and, do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the
I
truth?
do.
And who
Okay,
is it?
and if you could identify yourself,
Ann DeCenzo, also, again, a 30-year resident on Medway Street, and have walked every single day for 30 years. One of my dogs down Medway Street, children, everything. Never, ever have had an issue until the last couple of years, where we became scared to death to walk by the house, constant, and I don't remember ever a time where they were just a couple of minutes in the backyard, because I have about an hour-long walk, and I would walk by, and they'd be hurling themselves at the fence. And I used to meet a neighbor of mine, and we'd kind of meet in the middle there, and we decided months ago, we're not walking on Medway Street anymore. So we have to go all the way around through Cape Cod Estates and meet, and it's a pain in the neck. And again, 30 years of being able to walk on my own street, now I can't walk down my street anymore. So I just wanted to give a little testimonial to what it's done to the whole neighborhood, and it's just not right. So hopefully they have been rehomed or whatever you want to call it, but I do hope that, because I feel horribly guilty that I never contacted anybody before this and said that how nervous we were. I heard Janice's screams that day, and I felt horrendous that I didn't, again, ever call anybody. And the second I heard what happened, I said, could have told you months ago. I just knew that that was coming. So that's it.
so, just quick question, because this is about the dogs, not, I mean, there's that's one of the things that you would think about and consider is how they are, kept, is the 2 of them, are people being mindful, but as relates to the dogs themselves, as opposed to feeling like they're left out for a really long time. Separate issue, dogs are now being, we're assured under oath that have been rehomed, but as relates to the dogs and whether or not there's still something to be done about the dogs, what are your observations, or were your observations of the dogs in the yard? Did you observe them attack anybody or like
No,
what?
no. But just you were scared to death to walk by. They would be hurling themselves at the fences,
Okay.
barking like crazy. Our dogs would be scared to death, and we would just kind of scooch by as quick as we could. And then if you were ever walking by when they were in the house, but someone was coming out of the house, you like ran because you didn't know if one of those dogs was going to come flying out of that door. And again, so we stopped probably more than 6 months ago, I would say. Even walking down Medway Street, we go all the way around, which is a pain.
Okay. Is there anybody else? Oh, I'm sorry. Do you have any questions?
No.
Is there anybody else with any observations?
Can I speak as a resident?
Oh, heck yeah. Well, you're somebody else.
So speaking just as a resident of Norfolk, again, my property abuts 50% of the property where these dogs were housed. I had made adjustments to even my own animals, my horses. I would not leave them outdoors unless I was home, or if I was at work, I would take one of my security cameras to point it out to their paddock in case I needed to go home to help them if a dog was loose and came after one of my horses. As a resident, I feel horrible being in the middle of this. I feel grateful that I was there that day. I'm uncomfortable with these dogs as a resident, even being rehomed. So I hope you take that under consideration. And if you do decide that rehoming is an option, I would ask the board to somehow find contact information as to where they go. And as a resident, that if you do deem these dogs dangerous, it's important to have the parameters set up, because there's nothing in place in mass law that says they cannot go readopt these dogs and bring them back from another state. So I think it's important that that be visited as well.
So are you saying the last piece, that in the event, because having learned this, I'm mindful of the fact that the dangerous dog designation and the requirements, if that's the determination that the board makes, will track a dog. But to be able to track the dog, we need to know where the dogs are, and so that part of the designation would, if the determination were to be dangerous dog, short of euthanasia, I guess even with euthanasia, you'd need to know where the dog was. But that there would be like, that where the dogs are now is ascertained, and then it is determined that the information that was presented is as was presented.
I think
Is that
it's-
what you're saying? I just want to make sure.
Correct, and I think it's not just for my personal feelings. I believe it's for the whole neighborhood to have a little peace of mind knowing that, so this is weird, the animal control officer can ascertain and make sure that the dogs are not returning back into the town of Norfolk, or if they do end up being adopted into a Massachusetts town, that I can inform that animal control officer of what transpired here. And I just want to say, as a resident as well, if any of my neighbors, I've dealt with a lot of them in different capacities in my professional life, I think that people view that in my job that I judge them, which I don't. I just try to preserve public safety and make people follow the rules. Any one of my neighbors, especially the direct people in this situation, if they ever showed up at my door looking for a cup of sugar or a couple eggs or whatever, I'd invite them into my house. That's how strongly I feel about my neighborhood, and I also feel that that's how strongly I need to preserve and protect the integrity of this neighborhood as well.
Anything else? So the next thing, paragraph 4, says that after all of the testimony is received, the select board chair should invite the complainant and the dog owner or her attorney to make closing remarks if they want. So I'm getting the negative nod from the dog owner, and I'm getting the swearing off. So, moving on to paragraph 5, that thereafter the select board shall take a vote on whether to close the public hearing and begin deliberation. So, I guess we have to deliberate on whether to close the hearing. I am hearing no more evidence. Feels like the next step would be close the hearing, right?
Yep.
So, under
There's
the
some
potential
motions.
motions over here, do I have a motion under, it will be the bottom of the two?
I move that the board vote to close the public hearing of 2 dogs owned by Angelina Ford and begin deliberations.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Now it is closed, and now we're gonna deliberate. And do we deliberate with everybody still in the room?
Mhm.
That's right, we did it with everybody on the television set.
We're not gonna finalize an order tonight. You can deliberate and give us the sense of where you think you wanna go, so we can put together that document, so that the board can come back and review it, and then decide to vote on it formally at a subsequent meeting.
Okay, so for, the 2 viewers at home and the folks in the room, just to give you a sense of what's gonna happen next, we're gonna talk here right now and deliberate about sort of what we think we're sort of inclined generally to do, so that, everybody kinda knows the direction, and then, but not take the final vote. And the reason is that then, break probably until the whatever the next Board of Selectmen meeting is.
It's
Select board
actually
meeting.
next week. I'm not sure we'll have time to pull together all the written, the actual minutes of the meeting and so on. So, I mean, there's no time limit by which you have to do it.
Okay.
I think
Well,
it's
but I
also
think peace of
important.
mind for everybody, like,
Right.
all sides would like to know that, so we'll try to, there's a lot of paperwork involved no matter what you do, and so we wanna make sure that's done right, that people aren't sort of hanging in the balance, and so, but that's why we'll be doing deliberating, and then all of a sudden, we'll be like, okay, thanks, everybody, and so it won't completely be resolved, and,
We also may need some information from Ms. Ford about where the dogs are if we're gonna have follow-up. Because Massachusetts law only affects Massachusetts. It may be that they've left the state, but as pointed out during the testimony, if they were to come back, we need to be able to follow those. So having that information, which we don't have tonight, will be important.
right, and I think that is definitely sort of shining through, and it's not sort of anything sense of mistrust. I know none of these folks, beyond just wanting to make sure that everybody knows where the dogs are, that, to be able to manage that, so that makes sense to me. So, now we have to go to the statute, right? Yep.
So it's very clear that, first of all, you need to decide whether the dogs are a nuisance or they're dangerous. And then if you determine, for instance, that the statute's very specific about
Right.
the things that you can, choices you can make from the list, some or all. If it's a nuisance dog, it's a little more up to the board, what you would want to determine about that.
Now I'm seeing this section where, it's B, right? B is the
Yep, B has
statute,
the
right?
statute.
'Cause I see what we're supposed to do for rolling down our choices, but I need the elements, as they say. Those jury instructions, here we go.
Yep.
So, again, just, chapter 140, section 157 of the Mass General Laws lays out what it is that the finder of fact should be determining, and then if they find the facts, what then they should do about it. And so it looks like at the beginning is the subsection little a is that any person may file a complaint in writing to the hearing authority that a dog owner kept in the city or town is a nuisance or dangerous dog, provided, it's one of these inverted things, that no dog shall be deemed dangerous solely based upon growling or barking, or solely growling and barking, based upon the breed of the dog, or if the dog was reacting to another animal or to a person, and that the dog's reaction was not grossly disproportionate to any of the following circumstances. So then sort of in terms of was the dog protecting or defending itself, its offspring, another domestic animal or person from an attack? I would say no. I know I'm supposed to maybe finish all of them before, but I feel like that's a no. The person who was attacked, so there was no person attacked. So that we could skip that one. The person attacked, again, no person attacked. At the time of the attack or threat, the person or animal that was attacked or threatened had breached an enclosure or structure in which the dog was kept. Again, no, it was the inverse. So doesn't look like there's any sort of exceptions to the sort of automatic exceptions to the finding. From my perspective, do you?
No.
You see, I don't see any automatic exceptions.
Seems-
So then the hearing authority shall investigate or cause the investigation, including examination, which we've done, based upon credible evidence presented, then determining whether or not the dog is nuisance or dangerous. And I know there's,
Didn't see the definitions.
they're in here somewhere though, right?
A nuisance dog is generally a dog that's excessive barking, running at large, does not actually cause physical harm, where we have in this case.
So I understand but I think that there is somewhere that wasn't there somewhere that sort of outlined what a nuisance versus, I just remember that from last time, and maybe that was the old statute.
No.
That would be under 14136A as far as the nuisance language.
But other than that, I don't see anything in here that sort of says if there's a number of bites, that type of thing.
No, that has no effect.
We're just a little over-informed from last time, I
I
think.
know, right? Like, I was like, I remember that there was like a number of size, if it's been a 5 or a multiple 2s and a 3, but I guess that had more to do with the expert's determination of whether or not.
Yeah, we held this, we specified this hearing as under 140, 157, because a nuisance dog is, as I just mentioned, generally a dog that causes a nuisance.
Right, no, I remember that. I just was
So-
curious if there was any sort of boxes that we could check in terms of, how many times there'd been a bite, or the size or the severity of this attack, but that had to do with the expert, so, okay. So then I guess just the question is, what does everybody think relative to, the dogs, I think independently, with the contributing factor being the fact that they're together would be how I would look at it, but what do you think, Anita?
So it seems like our choices, from looking at this, is we can either A, dismiss, B, call it nuisance, or D, dangerous. And if we look at Maggie and Chance separately, it's hard to come to a conclusion that they're not dangerous.
Agreed.
I agree. I think it's, the point of the owner that she went and determined from an expert that, and it was sort of the same thing that Hilary said, that these were dogs that shouldn't be together. That was sort of maybe a contributing factor, but I get the sense based on everything that they were dangerous separately, and it's just good to know that in that rehoming, they weren't rehomed as a unit. That's somewhat of an aside. So I agree. I feel like that they're dangerous dogs, and so then the next question is, what do we think about that in terms of the result? Kevin? Oh, or Anita, I'm sorry.
I was just gonna say, in the minutes, there's choices that we have then, right? We're limited in what we can respond.
In 1 through 7, so the first one is humanely just restrained is number 1, and the number 7 is the dog be euthanized. And in between that are other things that the board could choose. So you can choose one of these, some of these, and as you know from the hearing we had in
We had somewhat of
2020.
an à la carte
We
thing going
picked,
on
it,
there.
yes, there were several. There was restraint and what happened when the dog was off the property, fencing when the dog was home, and that-
Insurance, right? There was
Insurance,
insurance,
yes.
and I remember there was a lot.
and a microchip. think the dog, with
Oh, the microchip.
the town
I thought of that.
chose everything except,
Euthanize.
altering the dog or euthanasia.
They were-
I
it
think
was
the
a
board
girl
picked
dog,
all
so
the
that's-
other choices
that
in
was
that
why.
particular case.
Right.
So I think what's before you is of these, and then the law requires you to stick to these choices. Of these choices, what do you think is the appropriate outcome for this situation for these dogs?
I'm inclined to separate the two of them, just because in the first instance where one dog got out, I understand that it was just Chance, right? Maggie didn't get out that first time, and Chance, without having Maggie there, wasn't feeding off another dog, took the inclination of its own to go and attack. Now, granted, it wasn't as severe as the other instance, but it seems like there might be a slight difference in the temperament of the two dogs. And now that Maggie is rehomed to Rhode Island, I'm sorry, did we ever find out where Chance is? For sure.
She's gonna get all of the information to Hillary, but my understanding was MSPCA also in Rhode Island.
Oh,
Well, that would make sense, because MSPCA in Rhode. I'm not sure that, because it's during the, I know we're taking information, even though it's a closed, but we'll get it.
okay,
But
so
that,
also
what I
in
heard
Rhode
was
Island.
that was the Rhode Island version of the Massachusetts.
And I also believe that organizations such as this, they assess the dogs that they're rehoming to understand what they're dealing with. I don't imagine that they just take a dog based on what they're told and go put it anywhere, right? Don't they do their own kind of evaluation as to what the appropriate place for these dogs would be?
So my understanding is just sort of based on Mass and also the television. So Animal Planet, so I'm maybe not the most, or I watch it obsessively, a little insight into my life. And, but I get the sense from the owner that the information was given, but that one of the reasons that we're looking to get firming that up is for Hillary to be able to sort of quarterback that, right? Because it's Rhode Island, and I don't know. I was born in Rhode Island, so I'll do deference to Rhode Island. I just don't know what they are, but I think so, right? Because to the degree that their job is to provide a safe home for an animal, it isn't a safe home for the animal if for an example we ended up doing everything but euthanasia, and then they just were like willy-nilly gave it to somebody who had, you know, a bunch of kids or other stuff going on, and it attacked again, and that's it for the dog, if that's their calling, or just even protecting the citizenry. So I would hope that that's the case, but I suspect that in addition to the belt of assuming that a reputable animal placement would have behavioral people come in and determine whether or not that dog even could be rehomed, right? It may be that it is a situation where the dog isn't going to get rehomed anyway, but that the quarterback to that would be Hillary, making sure that, and the microchip. Sorry.
The problem is, that I'm wrestling with is the state lines, right? Because whatever decisions we make here only go up to the Massachusetts border, right? So we can't make decisions beyond the Massachusetts border, and so then are we, I don't know, like are we sending a dangerous dog out to Rhode Island, right, to do dangerous things again? Because if we declare it dangerous, but it's living in Rhode Island, we have nothing to say about that.
I understand, and I don't disagree. I think what this does is it sends a clear signal when we can contact people in Rhode Island that this is the finding. We know it doesn't have bearing or doesn't hold any weight in Rhode Island, but they can understand what we did do, and that if these dogs were ever to, by chance, maybe different, happen to be rehomed back to Massachusetts, that would still apply, and we can follow through and make sure that the animal control officer in whatever community it is has a copy of this order. I mean, Rhode Island doesn't have to respect it, but they certainly can receive it and understand that I can't speak for the laws in Rhode Island, I don't know.
It would seem to me too that you really nailed it in terms of they don't have to respect it, but candidly, we've seen within our own town that people won't necessarily respect it when you issue the order here, and so to the extent that the order exists just, and those orders exist in order to notify and start to build the kinds of things that if people are going to adhere to it, will protect the community. And if they're local, then if they don't do it, you can summons them, you know, to the clerk, to a clerk's hearing. If it's Rhode Island, you can call and say, here's all of the information, RSPCA, what say you? And if they seem disinterested, you can, they have been notified that, and I think that that matters, as much as it matters to someone here, but you can also, I'm trying to think of a word other than Karen them, but you can make it, I don't know, you can make sure that they do it as much as you can here, I guess, right? We can't threaten the RSPCA, but in terms of if they are someone who cares, we have informed them. If they are someone or something that doesn't care, we can't enforce it. But between the time of a dangerous finding here and the time that a dog's owners finally get before a clerk magistrate is plenty of time to do the same amount of damage, is I guess my point. It's not a perfect point, but.
And we can't make them microchip the dog, but if they did microchip them, and then we had an order that said that, then if they did come back here, I think we even have an even better opportunity to follow them. And because
Well, I
it'd
guess
be
that-
easier to identify them.
That begs a question too, right? Because if the dogs have already been relinquished,
You're going down the same path I am right now.
because I was just thinking in terms of the microchipping. If they haven't been microchipped, I mean, if they haven't been relinquished, just the fact that they're in Ohio, I mean, it's like Wisconsin, Rhode Island, it's not like Texas and Mexico, right? Like they're getting over the border and afraid, escaped the law. It's, if they're still owned by the owners, then we could say you need to microchip them. Whereas if the relinquishing means that we cannot enforce the microchipping, I'm not entirely sure we can enforce the, it's just a great question for a lawyer. If only we knew one that knew this kind of thing, but it isn't me. Right? Like, I don't know. I think what you do is you sort of, I think it's still the onus is on us to make the determination, and if during that period of time we're gathering paperwork, et cetera, it's determined that there isn't much we can do other than.
Just put it into a paper airplane and throw it over to Rhode Island and say, there you go.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's my point, is what I'm trying to allude to, although I didn't do it as precisely as you did, but we could come up with an order that we feel is appropriate if the dogs were to remain in Norfolk. We absolutely cannot do anything that would restrict the dogs from coming into Norfolk, is that correct?
That is correct.
Right, so we don't have the power to do that.
Well, we do, number 7.
Well,
That's keeping it out of everywhere, I get that, yeah. So,
but where I thought you were going was talking about the fact of if one relinquishes property, that's what they are, can you then take how do we, I'm sure there's a case, right? I'm sure it's happened. So I'm sure you can and we can, but it's kind of an interesting bar review question, right? Like if I've signed away, if I've sold or given someone something, and can then another board make a pronouncement over that saying that is no longer mine?
I think we can.
But that would then should include the microchipping, which is kind of where I was going in the first place. Like it, right? I mean, maybe Rhode Island's like, I don't have to microchip. Well, then we would have to figure out a workaround. But it would seem to me that if we have the authority for the animal despite its location, then there should be a workaround.
I guess the question I have is, are they microchipped now? I don't know.
I
the
don't
answer.
know.
Were they microchipped, do we know?
Do you know if they're microchipped?
Okay.
So. So that was the piece that I was thinking of, was just whether or not, how do you get them to microchip?
Well, we can say number 1 through 5, right? With the determination that we are going to diligently track down the animals and share that information with whoever the new right? And then hope that that is good information that gives reliable information to those people.
Right, because I would think that, from my perspective, that if that was the direction we were going in, was the non-lethal, check every other box, it would be somewhat contingent, like I would want to make sure that before we even entered the order, like between now and the next time, the contingency would be that there was credible information that was given about their location and about the information that the people who had received the dogs had been given, before then adding the orders, right?
Right.
So that we come into the room knowing who has them, where they are, what's involved, and, you know, what's going on with them. Are they in training, or are they whatever?
I know, I feel like I have no interest in euthanizing somebody's dog, and I can hear in the owner's testimony that these are loving, caring animals when they're in the home, but when they're out or aggravating each other, they're dangerous, and so, I have no interest in that. That being said, the dogs have crossed state lines. Maggie, I think she said, was from Texas. They send Maggie back to the place where they adopted in Texas, and then the dog gets with another dog and attacks another dog or attacks a kid, and that makes me a little sick to my stomach. And so I'm left with two options that neither one feels very good, because I'm not interested in euthanizing a dog, and I believe they are dangerous, and kept separate, and with stipulations 1 through 5 in place, they could probably live safely in another community, right? But with another state where it's all up for grabs, I don't know the right answer.
So the only thing that I would think is that, to the extent that if someone were to declare one of my dogs to be dangerous, and I then moved to Florida, right? It's the same issue.
Right.
So,
It is.
to the extent that we will be able to sort of, that they are currently, at least one is, and perhaps the other, involved with rescue, whether it's breed rescue or general, I feel more heartened than the family or the person who you know just plans to go wheels up and sort of disappear and go back to not fencing and not walking. And to the extent, and I know that's not really our question for today, because the family has rehomed. I think that this case is a different case too, from the standpoint that I understand that the neighbors have been sort of terrorized by the dogs, but I think that as relates to the owners, that when they learned that there was an issue with the fence, they fixed it, where they thought they fixed it, and then when it happened again, they went out and they did all of the steps that we would have loved to have seen taken in other cases.
Absolutely.
We would have loved to see people actually consult with people who work with dogs and hear what they said, and then do it, and then, you know, apologize. And I'm not, you know, saying that there needs to be a group hug here tonight. That's just not really how I roll. But I do think that this is different from the standpoint of, I know that that's not about the dogs, but I just think it's worth remarking on that the people involved in this case, where everybody maybe have hard feelings because things were happening and maybe they felt they should have proceeded differently, once things did happen, how it was reacted was how you would hope people would react.
Yes, responsibly rehomed. They were.
And paying the vet bills and saying that they feel terrible and acknowledging that it wasn't Riley, right? And going to get the fence fixed and then realizing that you can't do it, and rehoming them separately. So those are all, have nothing to do with my determination as to whether the dog are dangerous or not, because they're no longer with the owners, but they are worthy of acknowledgement, because I know that has to have been incredibly hard.
Absolutely impossible.
And that is not to say that I am in any way minimizing what Riley has experienced, or Riley's family. I just know that there are a lot of owners of dogs who are attacking kids and dogs like Riley, and the owners, right up until, well, they never. see that it's anybody's problem but everybody else. And so, that's it. Then we're left with what to do with these two dogs.
So let me ask you this then. If I'm along the same mindset as Anita, and I believe you, with orders 1 through 5, making a lot of sense for the dogs if we are able to confirm where they are and if they are indeed separate. But if we are not able to confirm where they are, our calls fall on deaf ears, we never hear back, what is our course of action then? How would you change what we're looking to do?
It's
Because I don't
interesting you
think
say that because as I was saying it, I was like, well, there's that's an interesting question because to the extent, let's hypothetically say that the dogs are sent underground. And so no matter what you do, even if you then switch the order to euthanize, that's ineffectual because.
It's not like there's another group that's going to take that order and go to carry it out, right? So.
Right. And if you then find the dogs, it's not the dog's fault. Like they didn't petition to go off the grid. But it would be a situation where if it were the owners with the dogs, that I would say, because oftentimes it's an owner-dog combination that you're trying to, weigh with a dog, I would say then I would have to go to the next step because every single time there's been a case, and I understand about scary dogs and scary neighbors and people who don't turn dogs in or make any comments until they come in here, and there's kids who are bitten and all sorts of horrible things. Usually we try at step 1 to protect the community while also, being careful to not go that step too far. And so to the extent that there may be people who feel that while we're deliberating, they don't like the direction, want to wrestle around, I think that that's problematic for us when we're trying to make a determination. So, cycling back to the issue at hand, it's a great question, but I don't know that I necessarily know the answer. It was somewhat of a punt when we were saying, well, I think you would want to know before the next date, right? Because tonight we're just ruminating. We're trying to decide what's the right thing to do to help the community at large, to protect people we've never even met and dogs we've never met, to make sure that what happened to Riley doesn't ever happen to another dog, doesn't happen to another dog mom or family, and doesn't happen to another teenager who's trying to pull their beloved dog off of a dog knowing what's happening and not knowing how to stop it, right? All of those are things that we want to stop. I don't have a perfect answer, but it may be that sort of the punting is because if we put it on for another date with sort of an idea that the ideal would be to protect everybody without necessarily euthanizing the dog, and we then learn information that makes it clear that that's not going to be the case, then we come back with that. And so I think to a degree it was somewhat of a punt, right? But it would certainly be something that I think I was raising that I wanted the information more from a continuity standpoint initially, although I did hear it all of a sudden. I was like, well, what am I going to do from the standpoint that I wouldn't want to come back and then make the order and then say, now we want to find out if we know, right? Like I would want that information. It was more just a box to check.
Yeah, I was going to suggest that if the board wants to vote to deem the dogs dangerous and asks staff to draft an order with items 1 through 5 for the board to consider at another meeting. I do have a meeting with town council tomorrow on another topic. I can certainly talk with him about whether or not knowing the location of the dogs and being able to verify that is something that we can require and is relevant or not. Just get that, figure that out, or we should just go ahead with the order with items 1 through 5 and.
Right. So, but at least, so there's more information to gather because I don't have.
Yeah, you don't want to vote on an order tonight till we've actually drafted it.
Right.
So.
No, I understand that. We were just sort of ruminating through all the possible, and I'm mindful, I agree with you in terms of the difference in the dogs. I don't know that that's a fact, right? Because we don't know where Maggie was before.
Right.
but from what we can see for ourselves, we have only evidence of one dog going out on multiple occasions of printing on the horses and of, or at least the mini, and of attacking Riley before, of like launching and doing that kind of thing. But Maggie was right there with him at the, so who knows? But it does feel that way to me for whatever.
I guess the question I had, would you want any different set of conditions for one dog versus the other, or would it be the same conditions for each dog? Does 1 through 5 apply to one dog or both dogs?
I know that it's closed, but is Chance neutered? Just figured rather.
That was the only variable order that we could have really.
Right, it was the only thing you could add,
Yeah.
so.
I think both dogs, I think 1 through 5, both dogs. I think the dogs are dangerous, and I think 1 through 5, and that would be with my set of confidence that we could communicate to the current owners our findings. So if we don't know where the owners are, or if we don't have some kind of confidences about that, then I think.
Well, then I think when they do, when they, if and when, but I feel confident sort of a when situation, when they did show up, is that in and of itself sort of suggests that they knew there was a problem and then they were hiding it? And then does that add that extra, right, information where you need to know, all right, well, we can't trust that people aren't going to try to secrete these dangerous animals. And so, because to the extent, it seems to me that to the extent that I'm trying to make a decision, and you had done a really thorough job of vetting this the last time in terms of why does one pick something from the list or consider picking something from the list, why does one pick euthanasia versus fencing and insurance and neutering if necessary? And to a degree, it isn't, my recollection was sometimes it's the degree of dangerousness, but sometimes it's how much do you need in order to ensure that that dog doesn't get to the public? Is it all the way the euthanasia because you cannot guarantee it? Well, that's usually owner driven.
Right.
And unless they're like, those dogs that can climb fences and stuff, it's usually owner driven. And so if we realize that that's what's happening, I think that adds that extra layer. Whereas if you have people, organizations that are like, whatever the boxes are to check, we'll check them, that's a different situation, I think. So, should we put it on for another day?
Well, I think I'd like you guys, you need to vote,
Oh, we need to
determine the dog is dangerous, and
Oh,
then,
that's right.
and then provide, and I'd say I would amend the last of these choices to say, I'd add to it at the end and say, and direct staff to draft an order for the board's further consideration, with the
Put that-
selection of items 1 through 5.
I got as
Something
far as
along
a
those
direct
lines.
staff to draft, and that I lost.
Draft an order, including options or orders 1 through 5.
And that doesn't at any, and to find out the location of the dogs.
Correct.
Can that be in there?
Sure. And then we'll
But-
just have to be a little bit fluid about when we have all that information, when we're ready to actually provide you with the order to review and vote on.
Right, from my standpoint, I think that we could probably pick a date so that, people feel, and then if we need to, you know where to get me, if we don't have all of the information, we can, Jesus, I haven't eaten dinner
Um,
yet.
I think next week is too soon.
No,
but
I
perhaps
get
the
that.
meeting on the 16th or the first meeting in December.
I think that,
Do we have,
Yes,
should we
that's
do
a
it on a
date.
separate
No, it's not
date?
when we're picking.
Or on, not on a separate date as part of a regular select
I
board?
think since you've already had the testimony and the deliberation, if you're comfortable with it, we could have it on a regular meeting night. The tax classification is the big thing we do at the meeting, the second meeting in November.
what's that, the 16th?
16th.
How long does tax application usually take, remind me?
Does it usually take very long since it's just about discussing whether you're
Right.
in a single or split rate?
Oh, that's right, I remember that.
I'm not able to attend that.
PowerPoint slides, though. It's
Oh.
a full presentation.
Oh my God,
It's
so
streamlined.
magical, just,
I'm not able to attend that meeting that
Oh.
night, but
Oh.
that
So
seems like a
maybe-
coincidence.
We should probably move it then.
Yeah, we should make
So
sure that Blythe can come.
We need you, Blythe.
so I'd say that would
Not
push
feel
it out to December. I don't have December's
long time.
date in my head. I mean, I think we can come back to just setting that. I will want town council to take a quick look at it.
So the concern though is, what's the rule, right now, the dogs are there are no restrictions, or there are nominal restrictions on the dogs, is my concern. If it goes too long, right?
There
Are
are
there
no
any?
That's-
restrictions and they're not.
Because remember, because they've gone out of state.
Jurisdiction, right? Yeah.
Is that why? Because in past cases, there would have been,
They
you know,
were
at
in
least
custody.
or they had to be muzzled when they left the property. Like there were certain sort of like conditions of bail that were imposed, so that while you at least knew that while you were mulling, there was a requirement that the dog be leashed whenever they were off the property, that they had to be muzzled whenever they were out of the house, that kind of thing. But none of that is in this case, correct? Because
So, I did inform the dog owner that.
Microphone?
So I did inform the dog owner, from the date of the incident onwards, especially during the quarantine, that they needed to keep their dogs inside their fenced-in backyard, along with being leashed, and they had agreed with me in that conversation that they were going to leash their dogs from that point forward anyway. As far as why the department did not impose that, was a question was brought up whether it would be muddled by the fact of the proximity of my involvement being off-duty, on-duty, a direct neighbor between both parties, whether it would have been appropriate for me to put that order on or not at that time.
so I wasn't even asking that. I was just assuming that whatever was put on the dogs would have no longer been a requirement once they went cross state lines.
It wouldn't be in effect
Right,
once they
wouldn't
left.
been, and that was sort of my concern, was from the standpoint, and again, we're just talking in terms of timing. When it was local dog, you could say must muzzle, must leash, must do this, must do that. Even in the case where there was, they had asked for a continuance and we conditioned it on continuing. But in the end, where the dogs are, not under any of those restrictions, I'd prefer it sooner rather than
Sure.
later.
I agree.
In order for, you know,
I mean, we got the meeting next week, and then we have the meeting prior to town meeting on the 9th. I mean, we don't generally do business then, but we could. We'll be at the middle school,
right,
so that's possible.
I would say that.
I mean, I think we can have it
I have every
ready.
faith in, ACO Cohen to get, all of that information done. In terms of where the dogs are, it's just how long it takes to turn around the paperwork, right? What were you gonna say?
No, I mean, it's a completely valid concern.
To at least try it, to at least have, like, and that I think would keep pressure on as well from on us, from the standpoint if we're scheduling it for, if maybe next week is too aggressive, or aggressive's not the right word, but there's a word. It's a good word, I don't remember it though. Begins with an A. Ambitious. Perhaps next week is too ambitious. Certainly the 9th would be, but I am mindful that that's not televised.
It would not be.
And that may be problematic, but if YouTube it.
Unless you wanted to meet earlier and say meet here at, say, 5 o'clock, and then, I mean, you have to work with, NCTV to make sure that if you wanted to do it sooner, we could do it here and then go to the school.
We could all,
We
right,
haven't posted that meeting yet.
she's coming from, we could also perhaps do it on a maybe, just so that we can move on and let all of these good folks go home, should we just put it on for next week as a tentative and then figure out if there's another day, if it's not gonna be like, what are we talking about in terms of timing, and then we can take it off of the list if we need to, rather, I just wouldn't wanna put
Yeah,
it
you can
far
pass
out.
over it, you don't have to act
Right.
on it just 'cause
Well, and we can
someone-
even just report, this is where we are.
Yeah.
At a minimum, we could report where we are in terms of ascertaining where the dogs are and what is being done with paperwork.
That sounds good.
So now we need to, do I have a,
I'm ready.
all right, let's hear it.
We'll see. I move that the board vote to deem the two dogs, Chase and Maggie, owned by Angelina Ford, as dangerous dogs, and direct the staff to draft an order, including orders number 1 through 5, and to determine the location of the dogs.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
And so, do we need a separate motion on the date, or we're gonna
Nope.
put it on?
Nope.
Okay.
It's up to you when we put it on the
So we'll
agenda.
put it on for next week? No,
Second.
next week is the second.
So I think I just advise the owner to work with the animal control officer to get that information about where the dogs are, that we can verify. Name, phone number.
Did you hear what she said? So you don't even need to repeat it right back to you, as though I'm like
Just working for the
interpreting
chair.
town administrator for people in the audience. All right, so I have it on, my thing as well, and so, what were you gonna say?
I was gonna say to the dog owner that I'm so sorry that this happened in our town, and I just can't even imagine how awful that must have been, and I'm so sorry. And then to say to the dog owner that I also see how hard this has been for you and for your family, and I have a lot of respect for the responsible steps that you took, and hopefully working together we can do what's best for Norfolk. If I could go back in time and take that back, I would. I'm so sorry.
She really means it too, like, she would go back in time, she really would. I know you would.
I'm sorry.
No.
It's awful.
With that, is there anything else I need to do, or do we just have to have a vote to adjourn?
Vote to adjourn.
I have a motion.
Move to adjourn?
All those in favor?
Second,
Oh,
second.
I mean,
second.
crud. All of those, all those in favor having a second.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. We are adjourned.
May I ask a